All right, Black Week. All right. What's up, everybody? Is everybody having a good time? You enjoying Black Week 2? You loving all the content thus far? I know everybody's there's been a lot of content, right? But I hope everybody, I know there's a lot of content. You guys consumed a lot of content, so I promise I'm going to be a little bit more truncated in this keynote because I know y'all want to, get home, take a shower, get some food, get to the events tonight. But if you're like me, you saw a lot of interesting talks these last couple of days. And I don't know about you, but I'm scared to death. I mean, there's been a lot of inspiring talks, but even like Stephen's last talk talking about AI, there's also obviously a lot of things to be concerned about. If you heard Don Lemon yesterday talk about how they're coming for all of us, Joy Reid just put it down. Stephen talked about AI coming for our jobs. So I thought I'd end today with a little bit more hopefulness, right? Like, come on, we got to be optimistic. We can actually change the narrative, right? Do we have the power to do that, right? So what if I was to tell you all that everyone in this room, everybody in this room has the power to predict the future, okay? Not with, fortune teller, tarot cards, crystal ball, but just by being able to tap into the simple power of observation, okay? I'm a career entrepreneur. I run a pretty successful ad agency called Hero. I never worked at an ad agency a day in my life, ever. But what I did realize was the art of paying attention and the simple power of observation. Being able to recognize and identify the reoccurring social trends that have been happening since the dawn of civilized time, right? And if you're able to tune into those trends, you could be able to predict things that happen because society and history doesn't just repeat itself, it happens in predictable patterns and cycles. Just imagine being able to predict the next 9/11, the next housing crash, right? And God forbid, the next pandemic, right? We are in a critical cycle right now. And if you're able to read the tea leaves, you may not be able to just change your own outcomes, you may just be able to change the world. So, as marketers, we have marketers in the room. Any marketers in the room? I'm a marketer, and as marketers, we're always looking for the cheat code on really how to kind of unlock and better understand the human condition. What really drives us consciously and subconsciously at a primordial level, right? Who are we as humans? What innately drives us, right? Is it the pursuit of happiness? Is it love? Is it brotherhood? Or is it something more insidious? Is it greed? Is it lust? Is it power, right? Is it survival? Right now in the world today, it kind of feels like everybody's out for themselves. Like, what are the things that are really reshaping our subconscious? And for me, there's a book that really cracked the code on time itself. And it's called Generations. You guys may have heard it. It's real thick, though. So if you read it, you're going to need, a few weekends to read through it. But it's by two philosophers, William Strauss and Neil Howe. And here at Black Week, we believe in equal opportunity influence. And yes, two old white guys have probably made the most impactful cultural observation of our lifetime, right? They came up with something called the Strauss-Howe theory. And the Strauss-Howe theory is that they've hypothesized that since the dawn of civilized time, the world moves in 4 generational phases, or what they call turnings, right? These 4 turnings take society from societal stability to societal collapse, and then the whole process starts again and repeats itself, right? And so these 4 turnings are really, really critical in understanding kind of what phase we're currently in. And each turning takes about 20 to 25 years, and every 4 turning takes about 80 to 100 years. Right, so we're going to double click, and I'm going to take you through some of these turnings now so that you can understand where we are in society and how society is this cyclical, repeatable cycle of behaviors. So the high, right? So the high is the first turning, right? And this is when there's a strong ruling class. There's some semblance of societal structure, right? There is a ruling class that subjugates the working class. And in order to keep the working class subjugated, right, they create narratives of control. So whether it is fake enemies or religion, or religious obedience, or royal bloodlines back in the day, or some form of economic stability, or nationalism, things to make that working class really dependent or feel like they actually have some allegiance to this hierarchy or this ruling class, right? Then we have the awakening. And this is where the people who are being subjugated start to realize that's some bullshit, right? And usually that is precipitated by some kind of event, some controversy, right? Whether it's people getting cancer next to, some electrical lines, or maybe there's some tapes that are revealed that realize that somebody just, tricked the stock market, or there's some kind of event that makes people question, right, the ruling class's agenda, right? And then you have the unraveling, okay? The unraveling is really the interesting phase, right? This is where factions start to form, right? This is where the seeds of disruption start to get planted. We start to see innovators starting to kind of create new products, new technologies to try and disrupt some of the traditional legacy products and institutions that are actually governing the way that they live their lives. This is where people start to take the power back. You start to see the democratization of voices and pirate radio, or the underground starting to kind of give license to people to feel more empowered to kind of go out there and start to kind of agitate and disrupt. And then ultimately you have the crisis phase, right? And the crisis phase is where you have societal collapse. You have this transition, and then a new cycle begins, right? And this is really where it gets interesting, because what phase do you think we're in right now? We're in a fucking crisis phase right now, right? And what's really, really crazy about this, we start to see, and if you could backtrack about 20 years, you could see that the seeds of those disruptions that started to be planted, what it was, the birth of the internet, right? The creation of social media, the advent of the iPhone, right? These were things that started to occur, that started to democratize things that used to be consolidated forms of power and influence and communication, right? And so now those things have given birth to new technologies, new ideas, new opportunities that ultimately result in the ruling class having to make a decision. Either they get overthrown or they find a way to create space for these disruptors, right? So the good news is that every one of these particular phases or turnings also gives birth to a generational archetype, right? And you've all heard the adage, is it nature or nurture, that really kind of defines our disposition, the way that we think, our outlook in the world, right? And a lot of our subconscious behavior is based upon the societal events of the generation in which we've grown up in, those influences that start to kind of like slowly influence the way that we feel, that we think, the moral values that we have, right? And that's why we talked a little bit earlier. I talked a little bit earlier about this idea of these primordial motivations, like what's really driving us? And are we policing those? Are we self-aware? And the name of the actual archetype or the persona of the crisis phase is the hero generation, right? This is actually the name, the archetype that I named my agency after. And I'm gonna show you why this particular generational archetype is so important, but also very polarizing, right? So the hero generation, any millennials and Gen Zers in the house? All right, you're this crisis phase's heroes. You are the ones that are supposed to lead us into the next cycle, into the next turning. You are the individuals that have to carry the burden of disrupting the kind of legacy structures of the ruling class to make way for new thinking, new ideas, and a dawn of a new high, okay? But here's the catch, right? So let's examine a couple of these crisis phases throughout the dawn of the last maybe 400 years, right? 350 years. So first, about the first crisis phase here in America was in 1776, obviously the Revolutionary War, right? And during the Revolutionary War, you had this fight for freedom, you had this kind of like, let's break from tyranny, right, from the British rule, and you had our founders who really kind of represented this idea of creating a free society, right? They were the hero generation of that time that was leading us into a new high, a new cycle. But then when they became the new ruling class, what did they do? They doubled down on slavery. And they used slavery basically to help build the country. So that's the irony, that sometimes our liberators become our oppressors, right? And that cycle continues to happen because regardless of how pure your intentions were when you went into the process of disrupting the ruling class, you're corrupted by power that ultimately makes you the oppressive class. So when you start thinking about people like Mark Zuckerberg or even like the founder of Spotify, these individuals were really heralded as heroes, right? For like crippling old legacy systems, but now they're the villains of our time, right? So these are things that we really want to think about as we kind of move into these opportunities where we have influence. What are our real intentions in kind of creating these disruptive opportunities? So let's move into the Civil War, right? So if anyone really thinks the Civil War was about liberating slaves, I got a bridge to sell you, because it wasn't that, right? What happened during the Civil War, which was really interesting, was the North was becoming very politically influential, where the South was becoming very economically powerful. And they were becoming economically powerful because obviously they were leveraging the economies of scale and the efficiencies of slavery, right? And they wanted to succeed from the North, and they wanted to create their own country, and the North wasn't having that. And the whole reason that they actually fought wasn't to liberate slaves, but it was to consolidate power, right? So what happened after the North won the war is you had the birth of the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, the robber barons. You had the creation of Wall Street. You had capitalism consolidating into monopolies. You still don't believe me? Let's go to 1942. This is the next 80 to 100 years, the next crisis phase, okay? So yes, right before the crisis, this phase we had 12 years ago, we had the Great Depression. And America was fucked, right? But we went ahead and participated in the war. We defeated fascism, but what did they give birth to? It gave birth to the great military-industrial complex, right, here in America. And then that also resulted in the Cold War surveillance, systems of segregation. So while we defeated Nazis, right, we then created the CIA in 1947, right? So again, when you start thinking about our heroes, who then become our oppressors, because in order to maintain order, you have to kind of create new villains so that your people that you're subjugating rely on you for safety, right? That's a mechanism of control. Which brings us to today. You've seen a pattern here, guys, right? Another 80 years to 100 years, right? We have pandemic, economic freefall, mass protests, institutional distrust, technological acceleration, things that Stephen were talking about that are converging to create a global reckoning, right? So we don't know what the future will bring, but we see a pattern of behavior where the heroes who actually lead us into this disruption are now kind of presented with an opportunity or a decision. Who are you going to be? Are you going to allow yourself to be morally corrupted, right? Or are you going to actually break the cycle? And what's really interesting right now is when you see the transition of how heroes become oppressors, you see the values that they actually start with to the values they adopt, right? You go from protecting the people to protecting your own self-interest. You go from values to control. You go from democratization to ownership, to feeling part of you, being part of the revolution, to being above you. Because now you have something to lose, right? And that's where that primordial sense of power and control come in. As humans, we're hardwired to survive. We're hardwired to want to prosper. We want power. We want dominance. And it takes a very enlightened person to say no to that, right? And we see it happen on occasion, but we're seeing a lot of our heroes today that were part of a lot of disruption that's happened over the 20 years now becoming our oppressors or being a part of systems that feel oppressive. But what begins as disruption ultimately becomes domination. The very power that lets us rebuild can also be what breaks us. But how do we stop the cycle? Okay? Because if we don't stop the cycle, we don't break the cycle, what do we have right now moving into this kind of next phase? We have technopolitics. We talked about the convergence of the kind of Magnificent Seven and the tech execs from Silicon Valley now becoming entrenched in the political system. Surveillance becomes standardized. AI is unregulated. We're already seeing issues around copyright and ownership on ChatGPT. And then we trade identity for assimilation. We already see that happening in America right now with obviously, the attacks on DNI and the attempts to really kind of just whitewash America and make it more homogenous. But predictable doesn't have to mean inevitable. And I think what's really interesting about where we are right now, our millennials, our Gen Zers, you're the first generation that can see this pattern in real time. You have the ability to kind of see what has happened in the past and reprogram yourself so it doesn't happen again, right? So how do you break the cycle, right? Breaking the cycle first begins with breaking ourselves, right? It becomes, self-awareness is the greatest gift you can give yourself. So I put about 6 different kind of values here that I think you need to follow in order to ensure that we can break the cycle, right? Now, look, we're just a handful of people here, right? But the more and more we become self-aware, the more and more we behave in a manner that's consistent with these principles, the more that it can resonate with others, and we could hopefully break the cycle and not continue to perpetuate this kind of system of control. So first and foremost, be a perpetual student, all right? You don't know everything. Continue to learn. Continue to be empathetic. Continue to be open, all right? Part of the issue now is that there's different classes in America right now that feel they can't learn from us, we can't learn from them. We need to be perpetual students. Check your vanity at the door. Vanity is one of the biggest perpetuators of this oppressive behavior. If you need and seek validation constantly, it's already a red flag that you haven't gotten to that enlightened place where you've been able to check and manage your primordial self. It's okay to be accountable, right? And I think there's been a lot of conversations around kind of the issues with certain cultures not being able to reconcile the past, right? It's okay for white people to say, you know what, slavery was fucked up, or colonialism was fucked up. Right? In order for us to heal, we have to be accountable and truthful with our past. We have to start developing a giving culture, right? You have to give without the expectation of receiving, right? The more and more you give with the expectation to want, the more you will want, right? So we have to start being more giving of ourselves. We have to avoid the blame game in order to move on. Obviously, we see a lot of blaming right now. Everything is the Mexican's fault, or I got this job because of a Mexican, or we have to move past the blame game. And then we have to believe everybody can win. Success doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. In America, we're taught success is a zero-sum game. In order for me to win, you have to lose. That's not true. That's a system of control. And that's how we move from instinct to enlightenment. And that's probably the biggest fundamental change that we all have to make. We have to be able to self-police our feelings and move from our primordial self to our enlightened self, right? Our rational self, our ability to understand that, you know, once we get to a level of power, power doesn't have to be absolute. Power is something that we can share. So I wanted to do a really short presentation today. I literally wrote this yesterday. It's my first time giving this presentation, y'all, because it's been a little dark. And I wanted to say, you know what, we actually have the ability to change the game if we change ourselves. If we see the pattern, we can break the cycle, right? And as a marketer, I'm constantly trying to rationalize what's happening in society now. And there's so much great work out there that will give you some context into what's happening. This is not an isolated moment, right? This is some of the variables are different, of course, but as you can see, the pattern is the same. We keep repeating the same mistakes because we won't allow our enlightened selves to really dominate the way that we behave, right? So I have hope that we all can stay heroes. So I ask you to continue to be heroic in everything you do. Like I said, remember those 6 steps. Be a student, you know, giving culture. It's okay to be accountable, all right? But that's the only way we're going to change the game. So I hope you enjoyed that. But I do want to use this time to kind of really open this up to questions. I know that y'all been listening a lot. Let's have a dialogue. All right. Give this person. Thank you.
Name is Chase. I'm a cultural insights analyst, cultural intelligence. So love this presentation. My job is all about pattern recognition and observation. My question would be, if America is set and established on the principle of success is to be as close to whiteness as possible, obviously access has opened up. How do the heroes really overcome its oppressors once the oppressors start to begin to look like us? How do we mitigate that journey towards healing and establishing a newfound order?
When you say oppressors look like us, like people of color or?
Yeah, people of color who might be close to whiteness and see that as success once money gives them that power, that status, et cetera.
Well, obviously that's a system of control by the oppressive class, is to find ways to delineate and create divisiveness within the classes they seek to control, right? So race baiting right now is a system of control, but it's really about rich and poor. So if you look at the majority of the individuals who voted Trump in, they're uneducated white men and white women in rural parts of America, right? I would say there's also a lot of uneducated people of color that have also now tried to adopt this concept that white is right, and they need to actually get on the side of white in order to have a place when, you know, the music stops, right? And they want to have a chair when the music stops. I think it's incumbent on us to have the conversation. It's incumbent on us to continue to try and enlighten our brothers and sisters. Education is key. Exposing them to the patterns, letting them see that they're actually being fed some bullshit, and it's going to be a kind of a hand-to-hand type of process. Like, we actually have to start, you know, having the conversations on a very one-to-one basis. Like, people are very protective of their dispositions, of their perspectives. So it's really hard, and it's been hard for the Democrats to kind of find ways to really like impact people with broad strokes. So I would say you got to do the work. You got to have the one-on-one conversations.
Hi, my name is LaToya Powell, and I own a company called The Toy House, and it is about creative wellness. And thank you so much for this presentation. It is a presentation after my own heart, because at The Toy House, I build characters who are spirit warriors, who go through realms inspiring other people to basically become heroes and tapping into their cultures and inspiring people along the way. And so in real life, I also want to do that as well, through wellness, through therapy, through fantasy IP, and I want to build real spirit warriors through this entire presentation that you just gave. That's why I'm just like, I can't even believe you just gave this presentation. How can I tap into real life spirit warriors? Like, how can I get to them? Because I've been in the pharmaceutical advertising industry for 20 years, and now I'm doing this full time. And as a creator, as a PM leader, I know that I know how to touch hearts. I know from a spiritual perspective, I come from a ministry background. My family's in ministry. And I know that as an artist, our voices really do matter. And so having heroes standing next to me, sitting beside me, just being in the street, how do I tap into them and then just bring them along this journey so that we can all do exactly what you're showing us?
Well, look, like I said, I think self-awareness and educating yourself, and then, it's infectious. Like, once you're empowered with the information and understand what's really happening, it's empowering, right? It's empowering knowing whether you've been fed the red pill or the blue pill. Like, once you realize what you've been fed, then you can actually start the process of changing yourself and then changing those around you, right? So I think recruiting people becomes easier, right, once they understand that you know the path to salvation, right? And so, not to sound like Morpheus trying to recruit Neo, but it's a little bit like that, and it's a little bit like, again, going back to my brother's question, it's a little bit of that one-to-one type of conversations and finding individuals that are willing to accept the reality and then are humble enough to continue to police themselves, right? And so, not everybody is ready for it, right? But you just have to find your tribe, because not everybody is going to be necessary to kind of subvert what the oppressors are going to do or even change your disposition. So you just need a few people that can help find the next few people, and then hopefully you have enough people that can actually tip the scales. Yeah. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Hi, how are you doing? I'm Samson Armstrong III. I'm the CFO of Dynamic Service Solutions. Firstly, just an amazing conference. Just wanted to get that off first and foremost. Have to give flowers. But during your keynote last year, because I had the privilege of coming last year as well, you spoke a little bit about gatekeeping the culture and the responsibility of that intersection of executive and its dynamic in relationship to the culture with which they kind of hold the keys. So what I'm really curious about is, like, what are your thoughts, since we are in the middle of a crisis, around the responsibility of that ruling class in relation to the marginalized communities? I don't necessarily know what should be prevalent on their minds as they begin negotiating some form of survival, since they have some level of access. So what do you think in relation to that as it relates to their responsibility?
That's a good question. The stakes feel a little higher. Like, if you really think about the last 300 years and the other examples that I gave you, right, there wasn't the level of technological control that exists today, right? The tools that are at the disposal of the oppressors or the individuals who then take command in that high phase to keep and maintain control, we've never seen the likes of that historically, right? So it is really a function of understanding now what you think the ultimate goal of the oppressors will be, so that you can figure out the best way to kind of counteract that. And some of it is still to be determined, because when you think about AI and its ability to be utilized as an efficiency tool, yes, it's going to replace jobs to create a cheaper version of something in order to be more competitive in the marketplace. but then you fired everybody who actually can buy your product. So now you have a bunch of people that have no jobs or maybe basic income that actually can't take advantage of the efficiency that you actually created. So I don't necessarily think the process of what the oppressors are trying to do has been fully thought out, or the ramifications of what's going to happen with the introduction of like these technological revolutions have been truly thought out, and what the implications will be on society. I think how we best prepare is we have to prepare as if the worst is coming, because in most times they fuck it up. Whatever their plan is, they don't really execute it well, which ultimately results in the next displacement, right? So as marginalized people, obviously there are certain fundamental principles of survival that we can actually adopt regardless of what we're being confronted with, right? And that is obviously consolidation, right? How do we come together and share resources? That is being efficient and preparing as if, there could be another drought or another famine or another pandemic. What is the defensive positions that we start to take and start living more conservative lives? How do we start utilizing the tools that they're actually using against us to create, alternative systems? We talked a lot today about, how a lot of these media titans are starting to buy all the media. How do we start now utilizing these democratized AI tools to create our own media platforms that then house our own data? We can put it around our own walled garden so they can't be trained on the things that they need to know about us to get rid of us, right? And I think we are now so hell-bent on, or to some degree dependent upon the platforms that they've created, whether it's the vanity and the likes that we get every day that we can't live without. And as a result, we'll give them our data every day, and they're learning more about us, so they can either replicate us, or they can learn how to get rid of us, or they can surveil us, or they can figure out how much money we have, or what kind of lifestyle that we're living, so they can figure out how to audit us, right? So we have to start thinking and stop thinking that people aren't capable of some of the nefarious things that we just couldn't envision people doing, and start realizing that it's happening. I hope that answers your question. Yeah, right here.
Hi, my name is Irene. So as we all kind of know, 300,000 Black women have gotten either laid off or left the workforce this year. So what are some words of affirmation or advice that you would give for some of those women who might be sitting in this very room?
Yeah, again, given what I just shared, you have to assume that those jobs aren't coming back, or they're not trying to create alternative opportunities for you to get new jobs, right? So what is the counter move to that, right? Is it, all right, how do I become more of an entrepreneur? How do I develop my own brand? So, obviously Don Lemon is a unique circumstance, but he got fired from CNN, and now he makes more money than he made when he was at CNN. Like, what's the networked economy ideas that we can now start putting together, right? How do we build our own networked economies? How do we keep our money more cyclical within our own communities so that we can find our own efficiencies and economies of scale to subsidize or mitigate some of the things that are happening around us, right? I think we have to learn to be more entrepreneurial. We have to, and we have to learn how to use these tools to create systems that can free us and liberate us from some of the oppressive behavior that we're being confronted with. Yeah.
Hey, how you doing? My name's Ty of Station 95. Thinking about your conception of the patterns, right? I like to think about in terms of progress, historically what has helped before. And you think about some of the great leaders, especially of the 60s civil rights movement. But one of the things that they didn't necessarily have to contend with was the social media and how engrossing and capturing that is, and how desocializing and depoliticizing it is. And because these platforms are run by these billionaires, these super crackers, whatever you want to call them, those platforms end up being kind of preventative, right, for us to kind of get to those kind of heroic attributes that you said. So how do you think about trying to get people, I guess, into a more communal space? Because the revolution won't be televised, definitely not going to go viral. So how do we get ourselves off of some of these platforms and these kind of addictive spaces?
By stop being dependent upon, the dopamine that they give us every day, that we need to feel valued. Just think about it. How many creators really make money? The algorithm suppresses your engagement anyway. You only get 10% engagement on any content that you put out before you have to pay money to get more, right? So most people, if all of the creators or so-called creators that was only getting 5% or less engagement on Instagram left to go to another platform, like that would have a massive effect on Instagram's business, but could have a huge effect on another platform that's probably built to kind of be more diplomatic in its ability to give you opportunity, right? So, but we won't leave those likes. We need that vanity. We need that daily dopamine, but that's part of, that's the hokey doke, right? That is the part of the keeping us, oppressed, by keeping us dependent upon vanity metrics and things like that. So I think once we learn to break from that and understand that sometimes taking a step back could be 10 or 20 steps forward, we have to learn to do it less. And I think that is a hard transition when we grow up in a capitalist society where we need validation, affirmation, and we're taught that, success is about accumulating things, whether it's friends, whether it's likes, whether it's engagements. Our values are our sense of value is based on that. We have to change the way we value ourselves so we become less dependent on the systems that have been designed to give us fake value to keep us connected to a system of control. Look, a lot of hands just went up.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Harden, and I run a creator platform that helps creators become better entrepreneurs, and I work with brands on helping them navigate the creator ecosystem. Yeah. I want to talk to you about, or I'm wondering if you also have like a double consciousness when it comes to working in the advertising industry, where it's like predicated on you need more things, and also feeling like where your identity and your value system comes into play as you're doing your day-to-day job to service this ad agency and therefore your client, and then also coming home to your family to have conversations at the kitchen table about what it really is to be, a person of color in this space, in this world.
Yeah, I'm a massive contradiction, right? I will tell you, I fight every day to try not to develop my own oppressive, behaviors and qualities. I'm constantly trying to police myself. But the benefit that I have is I'm self-aware. I know that I find myself when I'm slipping, right? But, I like nice shit. You know what I'm saying? I like to look fly, buy nice clothes, I spend money on it. I scroll, I check if people are liking my shit on LinkedIn. I mean, I'm somewhat, guilty of some of the things that I'm professing that we try to break away from. But like most people, unfortunately, I'm more self-aware. So I can police myself when I'm really going too far, right? And I can make sure that I am still investing in kind of like, I just launched a social media platform of my own called Subculture, right? So check it out, subculture.co, sign up. But part of it is like once you understand the systems of control, then you can understand when you're kind of feeding into it, and then catch yourself and understand when you break free. And it's gonna be cold turkey. You're not gonna change your life overnight. You're not gonna stop doing things. You're not gonna live a minimalist lifestyle and just get off of all social media. But as you even see some of the trends with Gen Zers who are going dark more, there's more IRL experiences. They're slowly getting some fatigue from that. So there's a slight awakening that's already starting to happen, right? They just can't correlate it to this. They just think it's random. It's not random, it's actually intentional. So once you understand that your behavior is actually starting to drive you into a direction where you actually want to break, you now have to accept that and kind of lean into that a little bit more. Right? Yeah. Okay.
If we police ourselves for the next high, in your opinion, what does the next high look like?
Oh, I kind of gave you like the dark story, a little bit of like, the dystopian idea. I mean, if you listen to Stephen before, we're going to have Cyberdyne systems and Terminators and things like that. But there is a couple of different narratives, right? There is, how can AI be, something that actually creates opportunity? Or if we really think human nature is at its core more primordially driven towards more like a nefarious and more insidious nature, then we have a lot to be concerned about. We have a lot to really be concerned about. And if history is our teacher, most highs are associated with more polarity, more systems of control, right? So again, whether it is the fear of damnation, during the Spanish Inquisition. You're going to be damned if you don't follow me, and that's what the papacy used, right? Right? Or it is, let's create a Cold War with Russia. And so now everybody thinks that the Soviets are going to invade us so that we can scare you to death so we can spend more money on the military, right? So there's just so many of these, but now the systems of control are less about kind of like feeding you these storylines and now utilizing AI to control you, where we actually can make determinations if you should have money or have wealth or own possession or have a job, right? So I think the stakes are a lot higher now, and I think this is where we need more morality more than ever, right? And so we have to figure out what the counter move is. And honestly, I don't know what the counter move is right now because a lot of this stuff is so new. Kim.
Hi everyone, Kim Mercer, VP of Partnerships, proud cardholder and hero at Hero Media. Joe, do you believe that everyone is capable of enlightenment, or must you have a baseline fundamental value system?
I believe in God, so I do. I do. I believe in God, so I believe everybody at their, that society corrupts us. Because society makes us feel that we're always in survival mode, right? We're always in this space of trying to create space for ourselves, right? Versus realizing there's a ton of space for everybody. So I do believe it's possible, but I believe throughout the dawn of civilized time, we've all been programmed to survive. And despite the fact that we've evolved as people, some of those kind of instinctual values we have not been able to shake. Right? I still think that we're currently in the Crusades. I think there's a lot of religious wars. I think that there's a lot of, we call them terrorism, we call them whatever we need to tell them, but we're in, conflicts that feel very antiquated or, medieval in some senses. They've just been modernized and called different things. So we haven't really enlightened ourselves as much as we think. We have technological innovations, we have things, but primordially, we still want to survive and dominate. And until we kind of get past that and want to share and give and coexist, then I think we're always going to be in this scenario where high means kind of a mechanism of control versus a mechanism of providing greater humanity to all. All right. I got to wrap. But I'll be around. But I love this conversation. Stay heroic. Be heroes.